Thinking he had won the game, he put his mistress in charge and tried to cut his pregnant wife out of the business. But the next day, when he walked into the office, his blood ran cold at what he saw. The tiny blue shoes felt impossibly small in Eleanor Thornfield's hands as she stepped into the elevator of the Thornfield Investments building. She'd carefully wrapped them in silver paper, a small bow fixed to the top. 6 months pregnant, she rested her free hand on her swollen belly, feeling a gentle kick against her palm. "That's right, little one. Let's surprise your daddy," she whispered. The ultrasound images were still vivid in her mind. After 2 failed IVF attempts and years of heartbreak, the natural pregnancy had seemed nothing short of miraculous. And now they knew they were having a son. Eleanor smiled, imagining Garrett's face when she'd tell him. The elevator doors opened directly into the executive floor, revealing the sleek minimalist design that had been Garrett's choice. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Boston's skyline, the Charles River visible in the distance. October sunshine streamed through, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Strange. Melissa, Garrett's executive assistant, wasn't at her desk. Eleanor checked her watch. 3:45 p.m. Too early for Melissa to have left for the day. Especially with the Peterson account closing this week. Eleanor approached Garrett's office, noticing the door was slightly ajar. She was about to knock when she heard voices from inside. Garrett's distinctive baritone and another voice, feminine, smooth with a hint of laughter underneath. "Have to admit I didn't think you'd actually go through with proposing the restructuring so soon," the woman said. "Eleanor's pregnancy accelerated my timeline," Garrett replied, his voice carrying that confident tone he used when closing important deals. "She's distracted, emotional, perfect timing to make significant changes." Eleanor froze, the gift in her hand suddenly heavy. "And she really has no idea about any of it?" The woman again. "Eleanor's brilliant with operations, but she's never had my vision for where Thornfield Investments could go. She's content with what we've built already. Too cautious, too traditional." Eleanor's heart hammered against her chest. She took a silent step closer. "Eleanor never understood truly my vision for the Thornfield," Garrett continued, his voice dropping lower. "And now, with this baby, honestly, I don't know if I have the energy to be a father at this stage of life." "You deserve someone who shares your dreams, Garrett," the woman responded, her voice silky smooth. "Someone who can be your partner in every sense." Eleanor recognized that voice now. Vanessa Mercer, the financial consultant Garrett had personally hired 8 months ago, young, brilliant Yale graduate with model-like beauty that turned heads whenever she entered a room. The tiny blue shoes nearly slipped from Eleanor's grasp. She clutched them tighter, her knuckles whitening as the conversation continued. "Once we implement the restructuring, you'll have controlling interest in the company," Garrett was saying. "Eleanor will be too busy with diapers and 3 a.m. feedings to notice her shares being diluted." "And if she does notice?" Vanessa asked. Garrett laughed. "By then, it'll be too late. The board already thinks you're brilliant. Hell, half of them are in love with you." "Only half?" Vanessa's flirtatious tone made Eleanor feel physically ill. "The other half are women who see you as a threat," Garrett chuckled. "But they'll come around when they see the quarterly projections with your strategies implemented." Eleanor backed away from the door, her mind racing. 12 years of marriage, building Thornfield Investments from nothing into one of Boston's most respected financial consulting firms. And now this betrayal, not just of their marriage but of everything they'd created together. Her Harvard MBA hadn't prepared her for this. Her role as director of operations, managing 80 employees with precision and care, hadn't prepared her for this. Nothing could have. In the elevator down, Eleanor pressed her forehead against the cool metal wall, trying to think through the shock. The blue shoes were crushed in her grip. The next morning, Eleanor arranged breakfast on the terrace of their Beacon Hill brownstone. The October air was crisp, the maple in their small garden blazing red and gold. She'd made Garrett's favorite, Belgian waffles with fresh berries, strong coffee in the handcrafted mugs they'd bought in Vermont on their 10th anniversary. When Garrett appeared, freshly showered and immaculate in his tailored suit, he kissed her forehead absently. His eyes immediately went to his phone, scrolling through emails. "You're up early," he commented, not looking at her. "Thought pregnant women needed more sleep." Eleanor poured his coffee. "I had some thinking to do." "About nursery colors?" he asked with a distracted smile. "About the company, actually. Eleanor kept her voice neutral, her face composed. "I've been considering what my maternity leave will mean for Thornfield." This caught Garrett's attention. He looked up from his phone, a flash of calculation crossing his features before settling into concerned husband mode. "You shouldn't worry about that, Elle. The company will be fine. You focus on taking care of yourself and the baby." Eleanor cut a piece of waffle, the knife scraping against fine china. "Actually, I've been meaning to discuss the future structure of our leadership team. Any thoughts on how we should handle my temporary absence?" Garrett set down his phone, his posture subtly shifting from distracted spouse to CEO. "Funny you should mention that. I've been thinking along the same lines." "Have you?" Eleanor took a sip of her decaffeinated tea, keeping her eyes on him over the rim of the cup. "I'm thinking about restructuring the company," he began, eyes now firmly fixed on a point just past her shoulder. "I've brought someone new to the board of directors, Vanessa Mercer. She has brilliant ideas for expansion." "Vanessa Mercer," Eleanor repeated calmly. "The consultant you hired earlier this year?" "Exactly. She has an exceptional understanding of the market," continued Garrett, now more animated. "In fact, I'm considering making her a partner." Eleanor took another bite of waffle, chewing slowly. "And what percentage would she hold?" 15% initially, with potential to grow." "And where would those 15% come from?" asked Eleanor, though she already knew the answer. Garrett cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Well, considering you'll be away for a while with the baby, I thought we could redistribute your 20%. You'd keep 5 and—" "I see," Eleanor interrupted. "So you want to reduce my stake in the company I helped build to accommodate your new partner?" "It's just a practical matter, Eleanor. The company needs to keep growing, and you'll be busy with other priorities." Eleanor observed her husband for a long moment. The man across from her, with whom she'd shared 12 years of life, now seemed like a stranger. His sandy hair touched with distinguished grey at the temples, the confident set of his shoulders, the way his blue eyes could charm investors and secure multi-million-dollar deals, all suddenly unfamiliar. "I need time to consider this," she finally said. Garrett's face relaxed. He reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Of course, honey. No rush. We can discuss the details after the baby comes." Eleanor smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. "Yes, after the baby." That afternoon, while Garrett attended a business lunch Eleanor knew included Vanessa, she made 3 strategic phone calls. The first was to Reed Harrington, corporate lawyer and old family friend. Reed had known Eleanor since before she met Garrett, had helped draft the original incorporation documents for Thornfield Investments. "Reed, I need your help with something delicate," she said when he answered. "It involves the company and my marriage." "Eleanor, what's happening?" "I need to know what legal options I have if my husband is attempting to push me out of my own company while simultaneously betraying our marriage." There was a moment of silence. "Jesus, Eleanor, are you saying Garrett is—" "I need absolute discretion on this, Reed, and I need to know every possible legal angle. Can you come to the house tomorrow, when Garrett's at the Mason presentation?" "I'll be there at 10, Reed promised. Her second call was to her younger sister Zoe, a digital security specialist who worked for a major tech firm in Cambridge. "Zoe, it's me. I need your particular skill set. How quickly can you come over?" Zoe's voice immediately sharpened with concern. "What's wrong?" "Garrett is having an affair with a colleague and planning to push me out of Thornfield. I need access to company communications, emails, messaging logs, financial transfers." "Ellie!" Zoe's voice was pained. "Are you sure? I heard them discussing it yesterday in his office right after my ultrasound appointment." "That son of a bitch," Zoe hissed. "I'll be there in an hour. And Elle, don't touch anything on his devices before I get there." The third call was the most difficult. Eleanor dialed a number she hadn't used in 2 years. "Chen Investigations," a male voice answered. "Martin, it's Eleanor Thornfield." A weighted pause. "Mrs. Thornfield, this is unexpected. I know. And I understand if you don't want to speak with me after what happened." Martin Chen had been one of their most talented financial analysts until Garrett had fired him, claiming insubordination. Eleanor had suspected the real reason was that Martin had questioned some of Garrett's more aggressive strategies, but she'd failed to intervene. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Thornfield?" "I need a private investigator, someone discreet, thorough, and who knows the financial world inside out." "And you thought of me?" His voice held a trace of bitterness. I thought of the most ethical person who ever worked for Thornfield Investments, Eleanor replied honestly. Someone who stood up for what was right, even when it cost him his job. Another pause. What exactly do you need investigated? My husband and his new partner, Vanessa Mercer. By the time she hung up the phone, Eleanor had the beginnings of a plan. It would take time, precision, and the same strategic thinking she'd applied to building Thornfield Investments. But unlike the company, this wouldn't be a joint venture with Garrett. This would be her masterpiece alone. Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor maintained a perfect facade of resignation and acceptance. When Garrett mentioned Vanessa's name, which he did with increasing frequency, she'd nod and smile, pretending she didn't notice how his eyes lit up. I've been thinking about what you said, she told him one evening as they prepared for bed, about the redistribution of shares. Garrett, who'd been loosening his tie, turned to her with surprise. You have? Yes. Eleanor smoothed her hand over her pregnant belly. You're right that I'll be focused on the baby. It makes sense for someone else to step up during that time. Relief washed over Garrett's face, followed by a flash of triumph he quickly masked. I'm glad you see it that way, Elle. It's really what's best for the company. I just have one request, she added. Let's handle the paperwork after the baby arrives. I want to focus on having a healthy delivery right now. Of course, Garrett agreed readily. We can finalize everything then. As soon as he left for his morning run the next day, Eleanor called Reed. He's taking the bait, she said. I need you to prepare the paperwork, but with a twist. While Eleanor played the role of the accommodating wife, Martin Chen was documenting Garrett and Vanessa's affair with meticulous precision. Hotel receipts, dinner reservations, photographs of them entering and leaving private residences, all collected with professional detachment. Simultaneously, Zoe was unraveling a digital trail that proved more damning than Eleanor had anticipated. Not only were there explicit messages between Garrett and Vanessa discussing their relationship and plans to diminish Eleanor's role, but Zoe also discovered evidence of financial irregularities. He's been transferring company funds to an offshore account in the Caymans, Zoe explained, showing Eleanor the transaction records. Small amounts at first, getting larger over the past 6 months. Since he hired Vanessa, Eleanor noted. There's more, Zoe said grimly. I found documents with your signature on them, authorizing the transfer of personal assets, including your share of the brownstone, solely to his name. Eleanor stared at the signature. A good forgery, but definitely not hers. He's been planning this for months. What are you going to do? Zoe asked. Eleanor rubbed her belly, feeling her son kick vigorously, as if urging her forward. I'm going to teach Garrett Thornfield that some things can't be stolen, she said quietly. And I'm going to ensure my son grows up understanding the value of integrity. She picked up her phone and made one final call. Reed, it's time to call the board meeting. Garrett's silver Audi pulled away from the brownstone an hour earlier than usual. From the bedroom window, Eleanor watched it disappear down Beacon Hill's narrow street. His excuse had been transparent. Early strategy meeting with investors. She knew better. The Fairmont Copley Plaza offered an exclusive breakfast service to their suite guests. She settled at her laptop, opening the encrypted folder Zoe had created. Inside was a meticulously organized digital record of betrayal. GPS logs from Garrett's company car, showing regular stops at Vanessa's Back Bay apartment. Credit card statements revealing intimate dinners charged as client meetings, and most damning reservation confirmations for a weekend getaway to Nantucket, scheduled for next month. The baby kicked, and Eleanor placed her hand on her stomach. I won't let him take your future, she whispered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martin Chen. Outside, have new information. Eleanor found Martin waiting in his understated black sedan, a stark contrast to his former life as a rising star at Thornfield Investments. 2 years had changed him. His once clean-shaven face now sported a neatly trimmed beard, and his designer suits had been replaced with practical dark clothing that helped him blend into backgrounds. Mrs. Thornfield, he greeted formally, handing her a manila envelope. Please, it's Eleanor. She took the envelope. Especially considering what you're doing for me. Martin's expression remained professional, but his eyes softened slightly. I've been tracking their movements for 2 weeks. The envelope contains photographs and a detailed timeline of their interactions, but there's something else you should see. He opened his laptop, pulling up images of Garrett and Vanessa entering a private room at Boston Harbor Bank. This was yesterday, during your doctor's appointment. They spent 45 minutes in the bank's private client suite. That's where our safety deposit box is located, Eleanor said, her voice tight. It contains our wills, property deeds, and according to my contact at the bank, it was accessed yesterday, by both of them. Eleanor's blood ran cold. He would need my signature to remove anything, unless he already had documents with your signature. The forgeries. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. He's accelerating his timeline. Martin nodded. There's one more thing. They weren't alone at the bank. He switched to another image. Vanessa shaking hands with Leonard Kirsch, Thornfield Investments' second largest investor. Kirsch has always been more Garrett's ally than mine, Eleanor murmured. He controls 3 board votes through various family trusts, which is likely why they're meeting with him privately, Martin concluded. I can continue surveillance if you'd like, but the pattern is clear, Eleanor finished. Thank you, Martin. As she turned to leave, Martin spoke again. Mrs. Eleanor, when Mr. Thornfield fired me, you didn't stop him. Eleanor faced him, accepting the accusation in his eyes. No, I didn't. I believed his version of events without question, and that was wrong. Why trust me now? Because I finally understand what it's like to have Garrett Thornfield decide you're dispensable. Reed Harrington's corner office at Frost & Hammond Law offered a panoramic view of Boston Common, the autumn foliage creating a tapestry of red and gold below. At 62, Reed had the dignified appearance of a man who'd spent decades crafting impeccable legal strategies for Boston's elite. His silver hair was always perfectly groomed, his suits custom-made, his manner deliberate. What you're describing goes beyond a marital indiscretion, Eleanor, he said, reviewing the evidence Zoe and Martin had collected. This is securities fraud, embezzlement and forgery. Eleanor sat across from him, her hands folded protectively over her belly. I need to understand my options. Reed removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. On a personal level, divorce is obvious. Given the circumstances and your condition, you'd receive substantial alimony and child support. And professionally? That's more complex. Your shareholder agreement gives the board significant power in disputes between founding partners. If Garrett has been cultivating relationships with board members, like Leonard Kirsch, Eleanor interjected. Exactly. Then he might have enough influence to force a disadvantageous settlement. Eleanor leaned forward. What if I could prove financial impropriety? The offshore accounts, the forgeries. Reed's expression sharpened. That changes everything. The board would have fiduciary responsibility to act, but you'd need ironclad evidence and significant board support. I have the evidence. I need the strategy. Reed smiled slightly, the same expression he wore when preparing for high-stakes litigation. Then let's build your case, counselor. Zoe arrived at Eleanor's home office carrying a laptop bag and a determined expression. At 33, she was the technological prodigy of the family, brilliant, outspoken, and fiercely protective of her older sister. I've accessed his cloud storage, she announced without preamble. You won't believe what I found. Eleanor looked up from the financial statements she was reviewing. Show me. Zoe opened her laptop, pulling up a folder labeled Horizon Project. Inside were detailed plans for restructuring Thornfield Investments, eliminating Eleanor's position, reducing her ownership to a silent minority stake, and eventually merging with a larger firm where Garrett would become executive vice president and Vanessa would lead their Boston division. The merger talks are already underway, Zoe explained, opening another document. They've had preliminary discussions with Apex Financial Group. Apex is our biggest competitor, Eleanor said quietly. We've fought them for clients for years. According to these emails, Garrett has been feeding them information about Thornfield's client strategies for months, in exchange for his future position. Eleanor stared at the evidence of her husband's betrayal, not just of her but of everything they'd built together. He's selling our company out from under me. Zoe squeezed her sister's shoulder. There's something else, something about Vanessa. She pulled up another folder, this one containing Vanessa's employment application, resume, and credentials. At first glance, everything looks impressive. Yale MBA, stellar recommendations, experience at top firms, but I got suspicious when I couldn't find her in Yale's alumni database. You're saying she faked her credentials? Not entirely. She did attend Yale for 1 semester before transferring to a state school. She does have an MBA, just not from an Ivy League. And her work history has been enhanced. Eleanor considered this information. Garrett would have vetted her carefully. Unless he was already involved with her when she applied, Zoe suggested. The timeline fits. Her application came in 9 months ago, just when you started your second round of IVF. The realization hit Eleanor like a physical blow. While she'd been undergoing painful fertility treatments, Garrett had been laying groundwork for a different future entirely. "I need you to document everything," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Every falsified credential, every misleading statement on her application. Zoe nodded. "Already done. But Elle, there's one more thing you should know." She hesitated. "Vanessa isn't just Garrett's lover or potential business partner. According to their messages, they've already found a place together in Cambridge. They're planning to move in next month." "When I'll be 8 months pregnant," Eleanor said softly. Zoe's face darkened with anger. "That son of a—" "No," Eleanor interrupted, her expression shifting from shock to resolve. "This is actually perfect timing." Over the next week, Eleanor executed her plan with the precision that had made her an exceptional COO. Each morning, she'd kiss Garrett goodbye, maintaining the facade of an oblivious wife. Each day, she'd gather more evidence, coordinate with Reed on legal strategy, and prepare for the confrontation to come. With Martin's help, she documented how Garrett had systematically transferred company resources to court Vanessa, private jets logged as business trips, expensive gifts categorized as client appreciation items, even a diamond bracelet purchased through the company's expense account. Meanwhile, Reed identified board members who might support Eleanor once presented with evidence of Garrett's malfeasance. Diana Levinson, who'd joined the board last year after Thornfield helped rescue her family's manufacturing business. James Wong, whose daughter had interned under Eleanor and now ran their Pacific Rim division. Morris Taylor, the company's first angel investor, who'd always admired Eleanor's methodical approach to growth. "We need 6 votes to remove Garrett as CEO," Reed explained during a strategy session in Eleanor's home office. "Assuming Kirsch controls 3 votes against you, that leaves 4 board members we're uncertain about. Patricia Dunn will side with whoever she believes will win," Eleanor noted, referring to the notoriously pragmatic board member. "The Stevenson brothers generally vote as a bloc, and they've always been conservative about company direction, which means our presentation needs to be airtight," Reed concluded. "No emotional appeals, just facts that prove Garrett has violated his fiduciary duty." Eleanor nodded, feeling the baby shift within her. "And the timing?" "The quarterly board meeting is in 3 weeks. Too long to wait, given what Martin discovered at the bank. I recommend calling an emergency session. Garrett will know something's wrong if I do that. Not if we provide a different reason." Reed smiled slightly. "As your attorney, I could express urgent concerns about liability issues in the Peterson acquisition. It would justify an emergency meeting without alerting Garrett to the real agenda." "Perfect," Eleanor agreed. "Now we just need—" She stopped mid-sentence as her phone buzzed with a text from Garrett. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." Eleanor showed the message to Reed, who raised an eyebrow. "Martin's surveillance?" She checked the tracking app Martin had installed. "Garrett's car is headed to Vanessa's apartment now. Then we have a window of opportunity. I'll call board members tonight, schedule the emergency meeting for Friday morning." "Friday?" Eleanor's hand went to her belly protectively. "That's only 2 days from now. The sooner we move, the less time Garrett has to access more company resources or falsify additional documents." Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision before her. Once she authorized the emergency board meeting, there would be no turning back. Her marriage, the company, her entire future would change irrevocably. "Do it," she said, her voice steady. "Schedule it for 9 a.m. Friday." As Reed made the calls, Eleanor moved to the window, watching twilight settle over Boston. For 12 years, she had built a life with Garrett, believing they were partners in every sense. Now she understood their marriage had been as carefully constructed as one of his investment portfolios, an asset to be maximized and, when necessary, liquidated for something more valuable. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Garrett. "Just remembered. Have Northwestern Mutual pitch tomorrow morning. We'll need to leave by 7 a.m. Eleanor smiled faintly at the irony. Garrett would be gone before the board members even arrived, completely unaware that his carefully constructed life was about to crumble. She texted back, "No problem. Good luck with the pitch." Then she called Martin Chen. "We're moving forward. Are the documents ready?" Everything is prepared, Martin confirmed. Financial records, surveillance logs, evidence of forgery, all organized as Mr. Harrington requested. And the offshore account information. Comprehensive records of every transaction, traced back to Thornfield's accounts. Thank you, Martin. Eleanor paused. After this is over, would you consider returning to Thornfield? We'll need someone with your integrity to help rebuild. The line was silent for a moment. Let's deal with tomorrow first, Mrs. Thornfield. Then we can discuss the future. Eleanor hung up and turned to Reed, who had just finished his calls. It's done, he confirmed. The board will convene at 9 a.m. Friday for an emergency session regarding urgent fiduciary matters requiring immediate attention. And Garrett? As company counsel, I wasn't obligated to specify the exact nature of the emergency to him. His assistant confirmed he'll be at Northwestern Mutual until at least noon. Eleanor nodded, a strange calm settling over her. In 36 hours, she would either reclaim her company or lose everything she'd worked for. There would be no middle ground, no compromise, no amicable resolution. We should prepare for every contingency, she said. Garrett won't surrender without a fight. No, agreed Reed, his expression grim. But neither will you. Garrett Thornfield's morning had begun perfectly. The Northwestern Mutual presentation had gone exceptionally well, the investment committee practically salivating over his proposed strategy. Back in his Audi, he'd called Vanessa immediately. We're in, he announced triumphantly. 15 million to start, with potential for another 20 if the first quarter returns meet projections. That's fantastic, Garrett. Vanessa's voice thrilled through his premium sound system. Did you use the revised projections we discussed last night? Of course, they never even questioned them. He laughed, turning onto Atlantic Avenue, too dazzled by the potential returns to notice the assumptions buried in Appendix C. You're brilliant, Vanessa purred. Are we celebrating tonight? Absolutely, I made reservations at Sorolina, 8 o'clock. Perfect. I have something special to wear, something you've never seen before. Garrett smiled, imagining unwrapping Vanessa later that night. After a moment of blissful anticipation, he shifted gears, both mentally and in his luxury sedan. How's the rest of our timeline looking? Everything's on track, she assured him. I've already started looking at office spaces in Cambridge for the new venture. And once Eleanor signs those transfer documents after her maternity leave, she'll be too exhausted and distracted to read the fine print. Garrett finished. By the time she realizes what's happening, the merger with Apex will be announced. His car approached the gleaming glass tower housing Thornfield Investments. The company name displayed prominently on the building generated a familiar surge of pride. He'd built this from nothing. Just a small office with 3 employees 11 years ago to now occupying 3 full floors in Boston's financial district. Eleanor had been there from the beginning, he had to admit. She'd brought organizational genius to his visionary ideas. But partnerships, like marriages, sometimes reach their natural conclusion. Eleanor was meant for family life. She'd made that clear with her desperate pursuit of motherhood. Vanessa was his future now. Hungry, ambitious, unencumbered by biological clocks or maternal instincts. Pulling into his reserved parking space, Garrett noticed something unusual. Several unfamiliar luxury vehicles in spaces normally reserved for board members. Strange. There was no board meeting scheduled today. As he entered the lobby, his executive assistant Caroline hurried toward him, anxiety evident in her normally composed features. Mr. Thornfield, I've been trying to reach you. Garrett frowned, checking his phone. No missed calls. What's going on, Caroline? There's an emergency board meeting, she explained, lowering her voice. It started 30 minutes ago. Emergency meeting? What emergency? Mr. Harrington called it late yesterday. Something about urgent fiduciary matters. Reed Harrington, the company's long-standing legal counsel and Eleanor's friend. A flicker of unease disturbed Garrett's confidence. Why wasn't I informed immediately? I tried, sir. Your phone went straight to voicemail during your Northwestern Mutual presentation. Garrett loosened his tie slightly. Where are they meeting? Main conference room, Caroline replied, then added hesitantly, Mrs. Thornfield is there too. The unease intensified. Eleanor rarely attended board meetings these days, citing her pregnancy fatigue. And has Vanessa arrived yet? Ms. Mercer is already in the meeting, sir. She was specifically requested to attend. Now alarm bells were definitely ringing. Reed requesting Vanessa's presence at an emergency board meeting. That couldn't be good. Garrett strode toward the elevator. his earlier triumph evaporating. As the doors closed, he frantically scrolled through his emails, finding Reed's meeting notice sent last night at 9:38 p.m. Emergency board session. Urgent fiduciary matters requiring immediate attention. 9 a.m. Deliberately vague. Deliberately timed when Garrett would be unavailable. Deliberately excluding any detailed agenda. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor, where an unusual silence hung in the air. Employees glanced up from their desks as he passed, quickly averting their eyes, like animals sensing a predator or prey. Approaching the conference room, Garrett straightened his tie, adjusted his cuffs, and assumed the confident posture that had carried him through countless negotiations. Whatever this was, he'd handle it. He always did. He pushed open the door. The scene inside froze Garrett in the doorway. At the head of the table, his position, sat Eleanor, her pregnant form commanding attention in a tailored navy suit. Reed Harrington stood beside her with an open laptop. To his shock, Martin Chen was present as well, the analyst Garrett had fired 2 years ago for asking too many questions about certain financial strategies. Around the table sat the full board: Diana Levinson, James Wong, Morris Taylor, Patricia Dunn, the Stevenson brothers, and Leonard Kirsch, who, unlike the others, wouldn't meet Garrett's eyes. Most disturbing of all was Vanessa's location. Not seated among the leadership team, but isolated at the far end of the table, her face pale, her usual confidence nowhere in evidence. "Ah, Garrett," Eleanor said calmly. "Thank you for joining us. We were just reviewing some interesting financial discoveries." Garrett forced a smile, closing the door behind him. "I apologize for my tardiness. The Northwestern Mutual presentation ran long. Very successful, I might add." No one acknowledged his announcement, not even a perfunctory congratulations. "What's this about, Reed?" Garrett demanded, remaining standing. "Emergency fiduciary matters." Reed nodded gravely. "Indeed. The board has been reviewing evidence of significant breaches of fiduciary duty that required immediate attention." "What evidence? What breaches?" Garrett looked around the table, seeking allies. Leonard Kirsch still wouldn't meet his gaze. Bad sign. Eleanor tapped a key on the laptop, and the large screen on the wall displayed a complex web of financial transfers. "Perhaps you could explain these transactions, Garrett? Specifically, the movements from Thornfield client accounts through 3 shell companies, and ultimately to an offshore account in Grand Cayman." Garrett felt the blood drain from his face, but maintained his composure. "Those are perfectly legitimate strategic transfers to minimize tax exposure for our highest value clients." "Interesting," Eleanor replied. "Because according to our records, the clients in question were never informed of these transfers, never authorized them, and certainly never received the tax benefits you mentioned." Martin Chen stepped forward. "The pattern of transfers began approximately 8 months ago, coinciding with the hiring of Ms. Mercer." He gestured to Vanessa, who seemed to shrink in her chair. "To date, approximately $4.8 million has been diverted." Garrett's mind raced. This was impossible. Those transactions had been buried under layers of legitimate business activities. No one should have been able to trace them. "This is absurd," he scoffed. "Martin Chen was fired for incompetence. His financial analysis can't be trusted." "Actually," interjected Morris Taylor, the company's first investor, "we've had external auditors verify these findings this morning. The evidence appears conclusive." Garrett changed tactics. "Even if there were some accounting irregularities, which I'm not admitting, this hardly warrants an emergency board meeting without proper notice to the CEO." "The emergency nature extends beyond the financial improprieties," Reed explained, changing the display to show scanned documents. "We've also discovered numerous instances of forgery, specifically of Mrs. Thornfield's signature on corporate documents and property transfers." The screen showed Eleanor's actual signature alongside the forged versions, similar enough to pass casual inspection, but with distinct differences highlighted by forensic analysis. "These forgeries transferred several joint assets solely to your name," Reed continued, "including the Beacon Hill residence and the Martha's Vineyard property." Garrett glanced at Vanessa, who looked stricken. She hadn't known about this part. "There's also the matter of the planned merger with Apex Financial," Eleanor added quietly. The board members exchanged shocked glances. Even Leonard Kirsch looked up at this revelation. "What merger?" demanded Diana Levinson. Eleanor displayed a series of emails between Garrett and Apex's CEO. A merger my husband has been secretly negotiating for months, one that would dissolve Thornfield Investments as we know it, with significant golden parachutes for himself and Ms. Mercer, while leaving the rest of you with depreciated shares in a subordinate division. James Wong slammed his hand on the table. We built this company to be independent, Garrett. That was the whole point. Garrett felt control slipping away. These discussions with Apex were preliminary only, just exploring options. The term sheet suggests otherwise, Reed noted, displaying another document. As does the lease agreement for new office space in Cambridge under Thornfield Apex Holdings LLC. Patricia Dunn, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward. What exactly is the board being asked to consider today? Eleanor folded her hands calmly over her pregnant belly. In light of these discoveries, we're asking the board to vote on 3 resolutions. First, to remove Garrett Thornfield as CEO for breach of fiduciary duty. Second, to appoint an interim leadership team while a full investigation is conducted. Third, to initiate legal proceedings to recover misappropriated funds. This is ridiculous, Garrett exploded. I built this company. I am this company. We built this company, Eleanor corrected quietly. Every person in this room contributed to Thornfield's success. You're proposing to dismantle it for personal gain. Leonard Kirsch finally spoke. Garrett assured me the restructuring was about growth opportunities. He never mentioned a merger with Apex. Garrett felt the room tilting away from him. Leonard, we discussed this. The strategic advantages. You discussed leveraging Eleanor's maternity leave to reduce her role, Kirsch interrupted. Not selling the company out from under us. Vanessa suddenly stood. I had no knowledge of any financial improprieties, she announced, her voice shaking. I was brought in for my expertise in market expansion. Eleanor's gaze was cool. Your expertise, including your Yale MBA? Vanessa paled further. We took the liberty of verifying your credentials, Ms. Mercer, Reed explained. Yale has no record of your graduation. You attended 1 semester before transferring to Connecticut State. Garrett knew, Vanessa whispered, then caught herself. I mean, I never claimed. Your employment application and resume clearly state Yale University, MBA with honors, Reed countered, displaying the documents. A claim repeated in company materials announcing your hiring. The Stevenson brothers exchanged disgusted looks. False credentials, embezzlement, secret merger talks? What else don't we know, Garrett? Garrett's mind raced. This was salvageable. Had to be. He'd talked his way out of worse situations. The board needs to consider what's best for the company moving forward, he said, regaining some composure. Eleanor is about to have a baby. She'll be on maternity leave. The company needs strong, uninterrupted leadership. I couldn't agree more, Eleanor nodded, which is why I've developed a comprehensive transition plan. She distributed folders to each board member. This outlines leadership structure during my 8-week maternity leave, with James overseeing daily operations and Diana handling client relationships, both reporting to the board weekly. Diana Levinson smiled. It's thorough, practical, and maintains continuity. Exactly what I'd expect from you, Eleanor. Garrett realized with growing horror that Eleanor had outmaneuvered him completely. While he'd been sneaking around with Vanessa, his wife had been methodically building her case and securing board allies. I believe we're ready to vote, Reed announced, on the matter of removing Garrett Thornfield as CEO for breach of fiduciary duty. Those in favor? Every hand around the table rose, even Leonard Kirsch's after a moment of hesitation. The vote is unanimous, Reed declared. Garrett Thornfield is removed as CEO, effective immediately. Garrett stood in stunned silence as the board quickly approved the other resolutions, appointing Eleanor as interim CEO and authorizing legal proceedings to recover the diverted funds. This meeting is adjourned, Eleanor announced calmly. Garrett, security will escort you to clear out your personal items. Company devices and access cards must be surrendered immediately. As the board members filed out, many stopping to speak quietly with Eleanor, Garrett remained frozen in place. Only when the room had emptied except for Eleanor and Reed did he find his voice. You can't do this to me, he hissed. I'll fight this every step of the way. Actually, Reed interjected, given the evidence of criminal financial fraud, I'd advise against any public conflict. The board has agreed not to press criminal charges if you cooperate fully with the financial recovery process. Criminal charges? Garrett paled. You're bluffing. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division doesn't bluff, Eleanor said quietly, and they're very interested in those offshore accounts. Garrett stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Why? Why not just divorce me if you were unhappy? Why destroy everything? Eleanor rose carefully, one hand supporting her pregnant belly. You were going to steal my company, my home, and my dignity while I was bringing your child into the world. Did you really think I would just allow that? It wasn't personal, Eleanor, just business. No, Garrett, it was both. She moved toward the door, then paused. By the way, it's a boy. I was coming to tell you that day when I overheard you and Vanessa. As Eleanor left, Garrett collapsed into a chair, the magnitude of his miscalculation finally hitting him. He'd gambled everything on the assumption that his pregnant wife would be too distracted, too emotional, too focused on motherhood to notice his machinations. Instead, she'd orchestrated his complete professional destruction. Outside in the hallway, Eleanor leaned against the wall, one protective hand on her belly. The baby kicked vigorously, as if signaling his approval. That's right, little one, she whispered. Nobody takes what's ours. The Boston Globe headline stabbed through the financial district like a blade. Thornfield Investments, CEO ousted amid fraud allegations. Smaller publications were less restrained. Pregnant wife exposes husband's corporate and marital betrayal. Eleanor sat in what had been Garrett's office, now hers, scanning the coverage while absently rubbing her 8-month pregnant belly. The baby had been active all morning, as if sensing the turmoil surrounding his imminent arrival into the world. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Martin Chen entered, carrying a thick folder. The forensic accountants completed their initial assessment, he said, placing the folder on her desk. It's worse than we thought. Eleanor opened the folder, scanning the executive summary. 7 million? That's over 2 million more than our original estimate. Martin nodded grimly. Garrett was creative. The team found additional transfers hidden within legitimate international investments, particularly in emerging markets where documentation requirements are less stringent. How much can we recover? About 4 million immediately. The rest is more complicated, tied up in investments that would lose substantial value if liquidated prematurely. Eleanor massaged her temples. Every day since Garrett's removal had revealed new layers of his deception. Each discovery felt like reopening a wound that hadn't yet begun to heal. What about our cash reserves for the Peterson acquisition? Martin hesitated. That's the other issue. The down payment funds weren't just diminished. They were leveraged as collateral for a separate investment vehicle Garrett created with Apex Financial. Without board approval, Eleanor added flatly. Without anyone's knowledge except perhaps Ms. Mercer's. If we pull those funds now, we trigger penalty clauses that would cost us nearly 30% of the principal. Eleanor leaned back, feeling the weight of 40 employees' livelihoods on her shoulders. The Peterson acquisition had been positioned as Thornfield's major growth initiative for the year, the cornerstone of their expansion strategy. Without it, they would lose ground to competitors and disappoint investors who had been promised specific growth metrics. How long until the baby arrives? Martin asked suddenly, his professional demeanor softening. Just over 4 weeks, Eleanor replied, surprised by the personal question. And you're still planning to take only 8 weeks of maternity leave? She nodded. The company needs stability right now. Martin hesitated, then spoke with unexpected directness. With respect, Mrs. Thornfield, you're fighting a battle on multiple fronts. The company, your soon-to-be ex-husband's legal maneuvers, and in a few weeks, a newborn. Even you have limits. Eleanor smiled tiredly. That sounds dangerously close to concern, Martin. Professional assessment, he replied, though his eyes conveyed something more. The company can't afford for you to burn out. I won't, she assured him, though her exhaustion betrayed her. Schedule a meeting with the financial team for tomorrow. We need options for the Peterson situation. After Martin left, Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. He wasn't wrong. The constant discoveries of Garrett's betrayals were taking a toll, both emotionally and physically. Her doctor had already warned her about her elevated blood pressure at her last prenatal appointment. Her phone rang, Zoe's name flashing on the screen. Please tell me you're home resting and not still at the office, her sister said without preamble. Just finishing up some paperwork. Eleanor lied, looking at the clock. 7:45 p.m. Liar. I'm outside in the parking garage. I'm taking you home and making you dinner. Eleanor's Beacon Hill brownstone felt emptier without Garrett's presence. Though she'd never admit that to anyone, she'd already begun redecorating, removing traces of his aesthetic preferences. the stark modernist art he'd favored, the uncomfortable designer furniture that prioritized appearance over function. Zoe moved efficiently around the kitchen, preparing pasta while Eleanor sat at the island, sipping decaffeinated tea. "Have you decided what to do about the house?" Zoe asked, dropping fresh pasta into boiling water. "Reed says I can keep it. The mortgage is paid off, and Garrett falsified documents trying to transfer ownership, which gives me leverage." "Not what I asked," Zoe pointed out. "Do you want to keep living here with all the memories?" Eleanor glanced around the kitchen where she and Garrett had shared thousands of meals, planned their future, celebrated victories. Where he'd held her after her first miscarriage, promising they'd try again. Where he'd later plotted to take everything from her. "I don't know," she admitted. "Some days I want to burn it down. Other days, it feels like surrendering something else to him if I leave." Zoe stirred the sauce thoughtfully. "You know what Mom would say." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Houses are just shells. Homes are what you build inside them." "Exactly. And you're about to build something amazing with that little guy." Zoe gestured to Eleanor's belly. "Maybe it's time to create a home that's only ever known you as the strong, independent badass you are, not the woman who was betrayed." Eleanor considered this. "There's a property in Cambridge I've always loved, near the river. See? You already know where you belong next." Zoe served the pasta. "So what's really keeping you up at night? Besides the baby using your bladder as a trampoline?" Eleanor twirled pasta around her fork. "Today we discovered another 2 million missing. The Peterson acquisition is in jeopardy. Our cash reserves are tied up in unauthorized investments." "Business problems," Zoe noted. "Solvable with enough smart people, which you have. Garrett's attorney is fighting the removal, claiming insufficient evidence of wrongdoing. Legal problems. That's why you have Reed." Eleanor set down her fork. "I'm having a baby in 4 weeks, Zoe. Alone." There it was, the fear she hadn't allowed herself to voice at the office. Zoe reached across the island to squeeze her hand. "Not alone. Never alone. I planned this baby with a partner. Someone who would be there for nighttime feedings and first steps and all of it. Instead, you got a selfish, cheating fraud," Zoe said bluntly. "But that little boy is getting you. The strongest, smartest woman I know. And he's getting me. His slightly crazy aunt who will teach him to hack into school computers to change his grades." "Despite everything," Eleanor laughed, "that's not helping. My point is, families come in all configurations. Yours might not look like what you planned, but it will be filled with more love and integrity than Garrett could ever have provided." Eleanor felt the baby kick vigorously, as if in agreement. "I think he takes after his aunt." "God help you if that's true," Zoe grinned. "Now eat your pasta. Growing a tiny human CEO takes calories." The next morning, Eleanor called an all-hands meeting. Standing before Thornfield's employees, her authority now unquestioned, she addressed the situation directly. "As you're all aware, Thornfield Investments is facing challenges following the discovery of financial improprieties by our former CEO," she began, her voice steady. "I want to be transparent about where we stand and what happens next." She outlined the situation without sugarcoating it. The missing funds, the compromised acquisition, the potential impact on bonuses and growth projections. But she also presented solutions. A restructured deal with Peterson that would allow for a staged acquisition, a commitment from several board members to provide additional capital if needed, and a revised growth strategy that would maintain client confidence. Thornfield was built on integrity and expertise, she concluded. "One person's actions don't define this company. What defines us is how we respond to this challenge." The room erupted in applause, not the polite acknowledgement of a corporate presentation, but genuine support. These people had chosen Thornfield, had built careers here. They wanted to see it survive. As the meeting dispersed, Diana Levinson approached. As one of Thornfield's most experienced board members, her support had been crucial during Garrett's removal. "Impressive," Diana said, nodding toward the departing employees. "You've given them something to rally around." "I hope it's enough," Eleanor replied. "The Peterson situation is still precarious. That's actually why I wanted to speak with you. I've been thinking about alternative financing options. What if we brought in new investors specifically for the Peterson acquisition? Structure it as a separate entity initially, with Thornfield maintaining controlling interest." Eleanor considered this. That would solve the immediate cash flow problem, but who would invest given our current situation? Diana smiled. "I've already spoken with several interested parties." Your handling of the crisis has impressed people, Eleanor. Sometimes integrity is the best business strategy. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt genuine optimism. With Diana's investor connections, they might be able to salvage the Peterson deal without depleting their operational reserves. Let's set up meetings immediately, she agreed. If we can announce a solution before next week's press coverage, we can change the narrative from crisis to recovery. By Friday afternoon, a new plan had taken shape. 3 investors committed to funding the Peterson acquisition through a special purpose vehicle, with Thornfield maintaining operational control. The Peterson family, impressed by Eleanor's transparency about the situation, agreed to revise terms that actually improved Thornfield's position. The paperwork will be ready Monday, Reed confirmed, closing his briefcase after their final negotiation session. I have to say, Eleanor, you've accomplished in 1 week what most executives couldn't manage in a quarter. She smiled tiredly. Necessity is a powerful motivator. Speaking of necessity, Reed added, his tone shifting, Garrett's attorney has proposed a settlement. Eleanor stiffened. What kind of settlement? Garrett will drop all claims to Thornfield and sign a non-disclosure agreement about the circumstances of his departure. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal charges and he retains 5% of company shares. 5%? Eleanor was incredulous. After what he did? It's a minority stake with no voting rights, Reed explained. Essentially an investment position only. He'd have no influence over company decisions. And if we refuse, he'll fight the removal publicly. It would be messy, prolonged and expensive, though he would ultimately lose. Eleanor rubbed her belly absently, feeling the baby shift. He's trying to save his reputation. Mostly, Reed agreed, but he's also trying to maintain some connection to the company, whether for financial reasons or his ego can't accept being completely cut out of what he built, Eleanor finished. I'll consider it, but not today. Today, we focus on the win with Peterson. That evening, Eleanor approved a company-wide announcement about the successful restructuring of the Peterson acquisition. Employees would be relieved, clients reassured, and the market would respond positively Monday morning. For the first time since discovering Garrett's betrayal, the path forward seemed clear. She was preparing to leave the office when Martin knocked on her door. I thought you should see this immediately, he said, placing a laptop before her. It was buried in Garrett's personal cloud storage, an account separate from his company credentials. On screen was a document labeled Contingency Protocol. As Eleanor scanned it, her blood ran cold. It outlined a series of financial tripwires, automated processes designed to trigger if Garrett lost access to company systems. What exactly am I looking at? She asked, though she feared she already knew. Insurance, Martin replied grimly. If Garrett was ever removed from the company, these protocols would automatically execute a series of financial maneuvers designed to create a liquidity crisis. He booby-trapped our financial system? Eleanor was incredulous. Essentially, the first trigger was activated when his access credentials were deactivated 2 weeks ago. It's been working silently since then, gradually rerouting micropayments, delaying revenue recognition, and restructuring debt obligations. Can we stop it? We already have, Martin assured her. As soon as I discovered this, I had the tech team implement countermeasures, but what? According to the execution log, the final protocol was triggered 6 hours ago. It sent automated communications to our 4 largest clients, claiming irregularities in their account management and suggesting they request immediate audits. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Those 4 clients represented nearly 30% of Thornfield's annual revenue. If even one pulled their business, how do we know if the messages were delivered? She asked. We don't, Martin admitted. The system used external servers to avoid detection. Eleanor checked the time. 8:30 p.m. on Friday. Too late to reach most client executives directly. By Monday morning, those messages would have festered over an entire weekend. The Peterson announcement, she realized aloud. Our win won't matter if these clients are spooked by fraud allegations. Exactly, Martin agreed. This was Garrett's dead man's switch. If he couldn't have Thornfield, he'd make sure no one could, at least not as it currently exists. Eleanor sat back, one hand protectively over her belly. The baby kicked vigorously as if sensing her distress. Contact the emergency response team, she decided. I need everyone in the conference room in 30 minutes. We're working through the weekend. As Martin left to make the calls, Eleanor stared out at the Boston skyline, lights twinkling against the growing darkness. Just when she thought she'd contained all of Garrett's destructive potential, he'd found a way to reach from the grave of his professional life to threaten everything she was rebuilding. She should have known. Garrett had always prided himself on being 3 steps ahead. Even in defeat, he'd planned for one final act of vengeance. "Not this time," Eleanor whispered, her resolve hardening. "This ends now." "He did what?" Leonard Kirsch's voice echoed through the conference call as Eleanor explained Garrett's final act of sabotage. It was 7 a.m. Saturday, and she had spent the night with her crisis team developing countermeasures. "Automated messages to our top 4 clients," Eleanor repeated, suggesting financial irregularities and recommending immediate audits. "That vindictive son of a bitch," muttered Diana Levinson from another line. "Excuse my language. We've prepared individualized responses for each client," Eleanor continued, explaining the situation and offering complete transparency. "The question is timing. Do we wait until Monday when they officially receive these messages, or do we preemptively reach out today?" James Wong spoke up. "Preemptive is better. It shows we're on top of things, but it needs to come from the highest level." "Agreed," Eleanor said. "I'll personally contact each CEO today." "In your condition?" Diana asked, concern evident in her voice. Eleanor glanced down at her very pregnant belly. "My condition doesn't affect my ability to save this company." After the call ended, Martin entered with more troubling news. "We've traced the trigger mechanism. Garrett didn't just target clients, he also alerted the SEC about potential reporting irregularities." Eleanor froze. "When?" "The automated complaint was scheduled for submission at 9 a.m. Monday, so we have approximately 48 hours to prepare." Eleanor's mind raced through implications. The irony is staggering. He's reporting irregularities he himself created. "There's more," Martin said grimly. "The complaint specifically implicates you, suggesting you knew about the offshore accounts all along." The audacity was breathtaking. Even with his reputation in tatters, Garrett was attempting to drag Eleanor down with him. "Contact Reed immediately," she instructed. "We need to prepare proactive disclosure to the SEC before Monday. Complete documentation of when we discovered Garrett's activities and every step we've taken since." Martin nodded. "Already in progress. But Eleanor, this could get very ugly, very quickly." "It already is ugly," she replied, rubbing her lower back which had been aching all morning. "But I won't let him destroy what we've built." By Saturday afternoon, Eleanor had personally spoken with 3 of Thornfield's 4 major clients. All had been initially alarmed by Garrett's messages, but were reassured by her transparency. The 4th, Global Midwest Holdings, remained elusive, their CEO unreachable on his weekend sailing trip. Reed arrived with a team of associates, commandeering a conference room to prepare SEC documentation. The office hummed with weekend activity, as Eleanor coordinated between legal, financial, and client teams. At 4:17 p.m., her phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a Chicago area code. "Eleanor Thornfield speaking." "Mrs. Thornfield, this is Edward Jenkins, CEO of Global Midwest Holdings." Her heart raced. "Mr. Jenkins, thank you for returning my call. I imagine you received a concerning message about Thornfield." "Indeed," his deep voice rumbled. "Quite disturbing allegations." "I cut my sailing trip short specifically to address this matter." Eleanor took a deep breath. "Those messages were sent as an act of corporate sabotage by our former CEO, who was removed amid allegations of financial misconduct," Jenkins finished. "I read the papers, Mrs. Thornfield. What I haven't heard is why I shouldn't pull Global Midwest's pension fund management from Thornfield immediately." Global Midwest's $280 million pension fund was Thornfield's largest single account. Losing it would trigger a devastating domino effect. "Because that's exactly what Garrett Thornfield wants," came a voice from Eleanor's office doorway. She looked up, shocked to see Vanessa Mercer standing there. "Mr. Jenkins," Eleanor continued smoothly, "may I call you back in 5 minutes? I have critical information just arriving." After ending the call, Eleanor stared at Vanessa. "How did you get in here?" "Martin let me through. I told him I had information you needed." Vanessa looked different, her designer clothes replaced with simple jeans and a sweater, her perfect makeup absent. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested," Eleanor said coldly. "I'm not selling anything," Vanessa replied. "I'm here to help you stop Garrett." Eleanor's laugh was sharp. "You expect me to believe that after everything?" Vanessa closed the door and stepped forward. I know exactly how Garrett structured the Global Midwest account. I know which provisions he modified in the original agreement that make termination particularly advantageous for them right now, and I know how to neutralize that advantage. Why would you help me? Vanessa's polished facade cracked slightly. Because, contrary to what you might think, I do have a conscience, and because Garrett betrayed me too. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, skeptical. After the board meeting, he blamed me entirely for the Yale credential issue, Vanessa explained. Told everyone I'd manipulated him. Then his attorney sent me a letter threatening litigation if I spoke about his financial practices. Yet here you are, speaking about them. Here I am, Vanessa agreed, because I made a mistake getting involved with Garrett, but I won't let him destroy my entire career, and right now helping you is my best chance at salvaging some professional credibility. Eleanor studied the younger woman. Self-interest, not altruism, motivated her. Yet that made her assistance more credible, not less. What do you know about Global Midwest? Eleanor asked finally. Vanessa pulled out her tablet. Their termination clause has a hidden penalty for Thornfield, one that Garrett inserted deliberately as insurance. If they terminate within the next 6 months, we not only lose their business but must refund 30% of all management fees from the past year. That's nearly $2 million, Eleanor calculated quickly. Exactly, but there's a countering provision regarding performance metrics that Garrett never anticipated would be triggered. Vanessa pulled up the contract language. If we can show documented outperformance against benchmark by more than 3% for 3 consecutive quarters. They're locked in for another full year without penalty options, Eleanor finished, scanning the text. And we have outperformed by 3.8%, 4.1%, and 3.5% the past 3 quarters. Jenkins probably doesn't know this provision exists. It's buried in Appendix D, subsection 7.3. Eleanor considered the situation. Using Vanessa's information felt like making another deal with the devil, yet the company's survival might depend on it. Why didn't Garrett use this knowledge himself, she asked. Because he didn't realize I kept copies of everything, Vanessa said with a hint of satisfaction. He always underestimated what women might do to protect themselves. Eleanor reached for the phone. I'll need those specific references while I talk to Jenkins. The call with Edward Jenkins lasted 27 minutes. By the end, not only had he agreed to maintain Global Midwest's relationship with Thornfield, but he'd also offered to issue a public statement of confidence in the company's new leadership. As Eleanor ended the call, a sharp pain radiated across her abdomen. She grimaced, pressing a hand to her side. Are you okay? Vanessa asked, actual concern in her voice. Braxton Hicks, Eleanor replied automatically. False contractions. They've been happening all week. But this felt different, more intense, and they were coming more frequently than before. Martin appeared in the doorway. The SEC documentation is ready for your review. Reed says we should file first thing Monday morning. Eleanor nodded, standing carefully. Another pain hit, stronger this time, causing her to grip the desk edge. You should call your doctor, Vanessa said. I'm fine, Eleanor insisted. The baby's not due for another 3 weeks. But as she took a step toward the door, a sudden gush of fluid soaked her pants and splashed onto the office floor. Oh, she said softly, staring down in shock. That's not supposed to happen yet. Martin's eyes widened. I'll call 911. No ambulance, Eleanor said firmly, even as another contraction hit. Just get me to Massachusetts General and call Zoe. Tell her to meet me there. I'll drive you, Vanessa offered unexpectedly. Eleanor didn't have time to question this surprising alliance. Events were moving too quickly, both in her body and her company. 12 hours later, Connor Reed Thornfield entered the world, tiny but healthy at 6 pounds 3 ounces. Eleanor, exhausted but triumphant, cradled her son as Zoe hovered protectively nearby. He has your determination, Zoe said, stroking Connor's tiny hand. 3 weeks early because he couldn't wait to join the fight. Eleanor smiled tiredly. I had everything planned. The nursery isn't even finished. Control is an illusion, Zoe replied. Something you've been learning the hard way. A gentle knock at the door revealed Martin, holding a small blue gift bag. I hope I'm not intruding, he said, remaining in the doorway. Come in, Eleanor invited. Meet Connor. Martin approached cautiously, a soft expression transforming his usually serious face. He's perfect, he said quietly, then held out the bag. Just a small something. For both of you. Inside was a tiny blue sweater with Future CEO embroidered on the front, and beneath it a thumb drive. "What's this?" Eleanor asked, holding up the drive. "Everything you need for tomorrow," Martin explained. "The SEC filing is complete. Reed submitted it electronically an hour ago, ahead of Garrett's complaint. Diana and James have drafted a press release announcing the company's proactive disclosure and new compliance measures." Eleanor looked at him in amazement. "You're working from the hospital?" "The entire executive team is in the waiting room," Martin admitted, "taking shifts. Thornfield continues operating while you focus on what matters most right now." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes, the first she'd allowed herself since discovering Garrett's betrayal. Not tears of sadness or anger, but of profound gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Martin nodded. "There's one more thing you should know. Leonard Kirsch visited Garrett yesterday." "Kirsch? Why?" "Apparently to deliver a message. He told Garrett that if he continues his attempts to damage Thornfield, every major financial institution in Boston will know exactly what he did. Not the sanitized public version, but every detail." "Kirsch said that?" Eleanor was surprised. Leonard had always been Garrett's strongest ally on the board. His exact words, according to my source, were, "Boston's financial community is small, Garrett. We protect our own. Eleanor is one of us now. You're not." On Monday morning, financial news outlets reported Thornfield Investments' voluntary disclosure to the SEC regarding irregularities discovered under previous leadership. The company's stock dipped briefly before rebounding on news that all 4 major clients had reaffirmed their relationships, with Global Midwest's Edward Jenkins specifically praising the transparent and ethical leadership of interim CEO Eleanor Thornfield. By Wednesday, when Eleanor checked her secure work email from her hospital room, the crisis had largely abated. The SEC acknowledged Thornfield's proactive disclosure, indicating a standard review rather than a formal investigation. The Peterson acquisition was proceeding under the new financing structure. Client relationships remained stable. Garrett, meanwhile, had gone silent. His attorney withdrew the threatened litigation over his removal, instead requesting expedited settlement negotiations. "He's running scared," Reed explained during a brief hospital visit. "Kirsch's warning worked. He's afraid of being completely blackballed in the industry." "What's his counterproposal?" Eleanor asked Connor, sleeping peacefully against her chest. "He'll sign everything we want. Complete separation from Thornfield, non-disclosure, non-disparagement, in exchange for a clean public narrative that he stepped down voluntarily for personal reasons." Eleanor considered this. Part of her wanted Garrett's disgrace to be absolute and public, yet dragging out the conflict would only harm the company further. "Fine," she decided, but with one addition. "He forfeits all shares in Thornfield, no 5% retention." Reed raised an eyebrow. "He won't like that. Those are my terms. Take them or face complete professional excommunication." 2 days later, Reed returned with signed documents. Garrett had capitulated entirely. Eleanor and Connor came home to a brownstone transformed. Zoe had finished the nursery, filled the refrigerator with prepared meals, and stationed herself in the guest room just for the first few days. On her 3rd night home, while Connor slept in his bassinet nearby, Eleanor received an unexpected visitor. Diana Levinson arrived with a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne and news. "The board met today," Diana announced, pouring 2 glasses. "Emergency session regarding leadership." Eleanor tensed. "I thought we agreed I'd remain interim CEO until my scheduled return from maternity leave." "We did," Diana confirmed, "but circumstances have changed. The company's performance during this crisis has been exceptional. Client retention is at 100%. The Peterson acquisition is proceeding ahead of schedule. Even the stock price has stabilized." "That's all good news," Eleanor said cautiously. "Indeed, which is why the board voted unanimously to remove interim from your title, effective immediately." Diana raised her glass. "Congratulations, CEO Thornfield." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "But my maternity leave will proceed exactly as planned, with James and I covering operations. The board simply wanted to eliminate any uncertainty about leadership moving forward." Diana smiled. "This is their way of saying, we trust you completely." As Diana departed, Eleanor sat in the nursery rocking chair, Connor sleeping peacefully. Outside, Boston's lights twinkled against the night sky. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Congratulations on making it official. The team couldn't be more pleased. Another message arrived moments later, this one from Reed. Settlement executed. GT officially separated from TI. Clean break achieved. Eleanor looked down at her sleeping son, overwhelmed by how dramatically life had changed in just a few months. From betrayal to vindication. From partnership to single motherhood. From COO to CEO. She reached for her laptop, opening a document she'd been working on during night feedings. Titled Thornfield 2.0, it outlined her vision for the company's future, one built on transparency, ethical leadership, and genuine mentorship. At the bottom was a new section she'd added last night, the Thornfield Women's Leadership Initiative, a program dedicated to identifying and supporting talented women in finance, annual scholarship for continuing education, mentorship program pairing established leaders with rising talent, emphasis on ethical leadership models. Eleanor saved the document, a sense of purpose washing over her. Garrett's betrayal had been designed to diminish her, to reduce her to nothing but a mother, while he built a new life and career. Instead, she had emerged stronger, more focused, and more determined than ever to create something meaningful, both for Connor and for the company that bore his name. Outside the nursery window, dawn was breaking over Boston. A new day, a new beginning. Ready for what comes next, she whispered to her sleeping son. Connor sighed in his sleep, tiny fingers curling around her thumb in what felt remarkably like affirmation. Me too, Eleanor smiled. Me too. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of corporate restructuring and midnight feedings. Eleanor's maternity leave had stretched from 8 weeks to 12 at the board's insistence, though she'd never truly disconnected from Thornfield's transformation. Now as spring brightened Boston's financial district, she stood before a packed auditorium of employees, investors, and financial press for the company's official relaunch. Today marks not just a new chapter for Thornfield Investments, Eleanor began, her voice steady and confident, but a recommitment to the principles that should always have defined us: integrity, transparency, and genuine partnership with our clients. Connor, now a chubby 6-month-old with Eleanor's determined eyes, watched from the front row in Zoe's arms. He wore a miniature suit that had prompted more than a few future CEO comments from adoring staff members. The events of the past year revealed structural weaknesses in our organization, Eleanor continued. Weaknesses we've now addressed through comprehensive reforms. On the screen behind her, a detailed organizational chart appeared, highlighting the new systems of checks and balances. Where once Garrett had concentrated power in the CEO position, Eleanor had distributed authority among a balanced executive team. Financial approvals now required multiple sign-offs. Client accounts had enhanced transparency measures. Board oversight had been strengthened through independent committees. These changes aren't just window dressing, she explained. They represent a fundamental shift in how we operate. No single person, including myself, can unilaterally direct company resources or make decisions that affect our clients' financial futures. As she outlined Thornfield's new direction, Eleanor caught sight of Reed Harrington in the second row, nodding approvingly. Beside him sat Martin Chen, recently promoted to Chief Compliance Officer, a new position created specifically to prevent another Garrett Thornfield situation. Now I'd like to address something many have asked about, our company name, Eleanor said, transitioning to the question that had surfaced repeatedly in recent months. Why, after everything that happened, did we retain the Thornfield name? The room grew silent, everyone wondering the same thing. I considered changing it, Eleanor admitted. For days after the truth about Garrett emerged, I couldn't bear to hear the name, let alone see it on our building. She paused, glancing at Connor, who was attempting to eat his own tiny necktie. But Thornfield doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone in this room who built it, day by day, client by client. It belongs to the investors who trusted us with their futures. And most importantly, she smiled softly, it belongs to the next generation. Eleanor gestured toward Connor. My son will grow up understanding that Thornfield represents resilience, ethical leadership, and the courage to rebuild after betrayal. That's a legacy worth preserving and transforming, rather than abandoning. The applause was immediate and heartfelt. Several longtime employees wiped away tears. Finally, Eleanor continued when the room quieted, I'm proud to announce the Thornfield Women's Leadership Initiative. The screen behind her shifted to show the initiative's logo and mission statement. This program will identify talented women in finance, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, and provide mentorship, education, and career advancement opportunities. We've established a $5 million endowment to fund scholarships, development programs, and research into barriers facing women in financial leadership. Diana Levinson stepped forward to join Eleanor on stage as the program's founding chairperson. The initiative will welcome its first cohort of 20 women this fall, Diana announced. We've already received partnership commitments from 6 other financial institutions and 3 major universities. As Eleanor concluded the presentation, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Financial reporters crowded forward, eager for additional comments, while board members beamed with approval. Thornfield wasn't just surviving, it was pioneering a new approach to financial leadership that was garnering industry attention. Later, as Eleanor gathered her materials, James Wong approached. "Impressive rollout," he commented. "The industry is talking. I've already received calls from 2 competing firms asking how we implemented the compliance changes so quickly." Eleanor smiled. "Are they interested in our services or just intelligence gathering?" "Both, I suspect. But the point is, everyone's watching Thornfield now, and for all the right reasons." "Speaking of watching," Eleanor said, lowering her voice, "any word on Garrett's situation?" James nodded grimly. "The federal investigation is proceeding, though quietly. The plea deal Reed negotiated has held so far. Garrett provides complete cooperation regarding the offshore accounts in exchange for no prison time. And the financial penalties? Substantial. The SEC fined him $2.1 million personally. He's liquidated most of his assets to cover it and the legal fees." Eleanor felt no satisfaction in Garrett's downfall, only a lingering sadness for what could have been. "Where is he now?" "A cousin's investment firm in Phoenix," James replied. "Small operation, back office role. No client contact, no decision-making authority. Quite a fall." "And Vanessa?" James hesitated. "That's actually something I've been meaning to discuss. She's been reaching out to several board members, including me." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "For what purpose?" "She's established a compliance consulting practice focused on detecting financial fraud. Given her unique perspective on how such schemes operate, she's gaining traction. She's offered Thornfield discounted services." Eleanor was momentarily speechless. The audacity was almost admirable. Her exact words were, "I know where all the bodies are buried because I helped dig the graves," James added. Crass, but not inaccurate. "I'll need to think about that one," Eleanor said finally. "Her information about Global Midwest did save us considerable trouble, but trusting her again feels like putting your hand back in a snake's den," James finished. "Completely understandable. It's your call." That evening, Eleanor hosted a small gathering at her new Cambridge home, a graceful Victorian overlooking the Charles River. The property had required extensive renovation, but now perfectly balanced historic character, with modern functionality. The core team that had helped save Thornfield mingled in the back garden, Reed Harrington discussing legal matters with Diana Levinson, Martin Chen deep in conversation with Zoe about cybersecurity, James Wong entertaining Morris Taylor with stories from their recent client trip to Tokyo. Eleanor cradled Connor, who was fighting sleep despite the late hour. From the terrace, she watched her unlikely family, not bound by blood but by shared purpose and proven loyalty. Reed broke away from his conversation to join her. "Quite a transformation," he observed, looking around at the gathering. "Both personal and professional. Sometimes destruction clears the way for something better," Eleanor replied, "though I wouldn't recommend my particular path to anyone." Reed chuckled. "I wanted to give you something." He handed her a sealed envelope. The final documentation from the federal investigation. Eleanor shifted Connor to open it one-handed. Inside were legal papers confirming the case's resolution, Garrett accepting financial penalties and professional restrictions in exchange for avoiding criminal prosecution. "It's officially over," Reed said quietly. "Garrett can never again work in a fiduciary capacity or serve as an officer of a public company." "What about future claims?" Eleanor asked, thinking of Connor's inheritance. "The settlement includes comprehensive releases. He can't touch Thornfield or claim any ownership interest ever, and the non-disclosure provisions are ironclad. He speaks publicly about any of this. He faces immediate liability for the suspended criminal charges." Eleanor exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift that she hadn't fully acknowledged was still there. "Thank you, Reed, for everything. My pleasure. Though I must admit, watching you transform crisis into opportunity has been the highlight of my career." He glanced at Connor, now sleeping against Eleanor's shoulder. "That young man has quite the example to follow." As Reed rejoined the party, Eleanor carried Connor upstairs to his nursery, a sunny room decorated with vintage maps and financial district skylines from cities around the world. She settled into the rocking chair, holding her sleeping son. "Your daddy made terrible choices," she whispered, "but they led me to make better ones. Someday you'll understand that the biggest challenges can become the greatest opportunities." Connor stirred slightly, tiny fingers curling around the collar of her blouse. "The company that bears your name will stand for something different now," she continued softly. "Something worthwhile, something I'll be proud to leave to you if you want it." A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Zoe appeared in the doorway. "Martin's leaving. Wanted to say goodbye," she whispered. "And there's something you should see downstairs." Once Connor was settled in his crib, Eleanor followed Zoe to her home office. On the desk sat a distinctive blue folder bearing the Department of Justice seal. "Where did you get this?" Eleanor asked sharply. "It was delivered by courier this afternoon. I was going to give it to you after the party." Eleanor opened the folder cautiously. Inside was a brief letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office, thanking her for her cooperation in the investigation into Garrett Thornfield's financial activities. Attached was a copy of the final settlement agreement, identical to what Reed had just shown her, with one significant addition. "Asset forfeiture," Eleanor read aloud. "I don't understand. Reed didn't mention this." "Read the next paragraph," Zoe prompted. Eleanor scanned the document. "As part of the negotiated settlement, Garrett Thornfield has surrendered his interest in properties located in Nantucket, Massachusetts, and Vail, Colorado, with estimated combined value of $8.3 million. These assets will be liquidated, with proceeds designated for restoration of investor losses and support of financial literacy programs." She looked up at Zoe, confused. "I didn't know Garrett owned property in Nantucket or Vail." "He didn't," Zoe said with a small smile. "Not officially." Understanding dawned slowly. "These were purchased with the offshore funds." Zoe nodded. "Properties acquired through shell companies linked to those Cayman accounts, the kind of assets federal authorities love to seize." "But how did they know?" "Our evidence trail showed the money going offshore, but not where it went afterward." Zoe hesitated. "Remember when you asked me to trace all possible destinations for those diverted funds? I found the property connections, but didn't include them in our board presentation because they weren't relevant to removing Garrett." "You found them but didn't tell me." Eleanor was surprised. "I didn't tell you," Zoe confirmed, "but I did tell someone else." "Who?" "The FBI's Financial Crimes Division, anonymously through secure channels, 3 days after Garrett was removed." Eleanor stared at her sister in astonishment. "You triggered a federal investigation without telling me. You were dealing with enough. The company crisis, advanced pregnancy, divorce proceedings. You didn't need federal authorities complicating things." "Zoe, you could have faced serious consequences for interfering in bringing a financial criminal to justice," Zoe interrupted. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Garrett deserved more than just losing his job." Eleanor sank into her desk chair, processing this revelation. All these months, she'd believed the federal case against Garrett had developed naturally from Thornfield's SEC disclosures. Instead, her sister had deliberately ensured Garrett faced maximum consequences. "Are you angry?" Zoe asked finally. Eleanor looked up at her fierce, brilliant sister. "No," she said honestly. "I'm just realizing there's more than one way to architect justice." The following Monday, Eleanor arrived at Thornfield's offices earlier than usual. The relaunch had generated significant positive press, with the Women's Leadership Initiative receiving particular attention. Her inbox overflowed with congratulatory messages and partnership inquiries. Martin met her at the elevator, tablet in hand. "Good morning. The executive committee is assembled in the small conference room. We have several items requiring immediate attention." Eleanor smiled at his efficiency. "Lead the way." The meeting proceeded with the streamlined precision that had become Thornfield's new hallmark. Each department reported status updates, the Peterson acquisition integration was progressing ahead of schedule, and 3 new institutional clients had signed preliminary agreements following the relaunch announcement. One final item Martin said as the meeting concluded. The candidate you recommended for the Women's Leadership Initiative, Natalie Colon from South Boston. What about her? Eleanor asked. Her application is exceptional. Finance degree from UMass, 2 years at a regional bank, perfect recommendations, but she's 29, which exceeds our target age range of 20 to 27. Eleanor considered this. The age restriction was meant to focus on early career women, but exceptions should be made for exceptional candidates. Approve her application, Martin nodded. I'll inform the committee. He hesitated. May I ask about your interest in this particular candidate? 5 years ago, I interviewed her for an entry-level position here, Eleanor explained. Garrett overruled me, saying she lacked polish. What he meant was that her South Boston accent and community college start didn't fit his image of Thornfield. And you remembered her all this time? I keep a file, Eleanor admitted. Every promising candidate we rejected for the wrong reasons. There are 23 names on that list, and each one will receive a personal invitation to apply for appropriate positions as we continue expanding. Martin's expression shifted from surprise to respect. That's remarkably thorough. Justice takes many forms, Martin. Sometimes it's about making things right in ways no one else sees. Later, alone in her office, Eleanor reviewed the final design for the Thornfield Women's Leadership Initiative's dedicated space, a completely renovated floor that had once housed Garrett's executive suite, where he had maintained an ostentatious private office with expensive artwork and limited access. There would now be collaborative spaces, mentorship centers, and educational facilities open to participants from across the financial industry. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Lunch, Connor and I are downstairs. Eleanor smiled, gathering her things. As she prepared to leave, Diana Levinson appeared in her doorway. Got a minute? Diana asked. For you, always. Diana closed the door behind her. I just received a rather interesting phone call from Leonard Kirsch. He's retiring from active investment. After 40 years. That's significant. Indeed. And he's looking to place his considerable portfolio with a firm he trusts implicitly. Diana smiled. He specifically mentioned being impressed by a certain CEO's handling of recent challenges. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. The same Leonard Kirsch, who was Garrett's strongest ally. The very same. Apparently, watching you rebuild Thornfield changed his perspective on leadership qualities. His exact words were, I've been backing the wrong Thornfield all these years. That's unexpected. Unexpected and lucrative, Diana noted. Kirsch's personal portfolio exceeds $300 million. Combined with his family trusts, we're talking nearly $500 million in assets under management. Eleanor absorbed this news. Arrange a proper meeting. If he's serious, this represents significant validation of our new direction. After Diana left, Eleanor paused at her office window, looking out over Boston's financial district. 1 year ago, she had stood in this same spot, pregnant and betrayed, watching her husband drive away to meet his mistress. She'd felt powerless then, despite her title and ownership stake, a passenger in her own life. Now she stood as unquestioned leader of a transformed organization that was setting new standards for the industry. The path had been brutal, the lessons expensive, but the outcome exceeded anything she could have imagined during those dark days. Her phone buzzed again. We have croissants, and someone is getting impatient to see his mum. Eleanor smiled, gathering her things. Thornfield would always bear her ex-husband's name, but it now embodied her values, her vision, and her legacy, a legacy she was building for Connor, and for every woman who deserved opportunity based on merit rather than privilege. As she rode the elevator down, Eleanor reflected on something her mother had told her years ago. Sometimes people enter your life to show you exactly who you don't want to be. Garrett had certainly done that. In trying to diminish her, he had inadvertently revealed her true strength. In attempting to steal her company, he had forced her to reimagine it. In betraying her trust, he had taught her to rely on her own judgment above all. The elevator doors opened to reveal Zoe holding Connor, who immediately reached for his mother with a delighted squeal. There's my boy, Eleanor said, gathering him into her arms. Ready to help Mommy change the world? Connor babbled happily, tiny hands patting her face as if in enthusiastic agreement. I'll take that as a yes, Eleanor laughed, walking out into the sunshine with her son and her sister, leaving the shadows of betrayal firmly behind. In the distance, Thornfield Tower gleamed against the spring sky, its windows reflecting light in all directions. Not an empire of sand as Garrett had built, but a fortress on solid rock, designed to weather any storm that might come. "Higher, Mummy! Higher!" Connor Thornfield, now 5 years old, pumped his legs vigorously as Eleanor pushed the swing in their Cambridge backyard. His sandy hair caught the late afternoon sunlight, a painful reminder of his father's genetics, though his determined personality and analytical mind were purely Eleanor's. "Any higher and you'll orbit the moon," she laughed, giving one final push before stepping back to watch him soar. 5 years had transformed both of them. Connor had grown from a tiny, vulnerable newborn into a confident kindergartner who already showed an uncanny aptitude for numbers and patterns. Eleanor had evolved too, from a woman fighting for professional survival into one of Boston's most respected financial leaders. 5 more minutes, then we need to get ready," she reminded him. "The gala starts at 7. Connor groaned dramatically, but nodded. Tonight marked the 5th anniversary of the Thornfield Women's Leadership Initiative, now recognized nationally as a pioneering program that had already changed the trajectory of over 100 women's careers in finance. From the patio, Eleanor watched her son while reviewing mental notes for her keynote speech. The initiative's success had exceeded every expectation, expanding from the original 20 participants to a comprehensive ecosystem that included undergraduate scholarships, executive mentoring, and venture capital funding specifically for women-led financial startups. "Ms. Eleanor," called Maria, Connor's nanny. "Your dress just arrived." "Thank you, Maria. We'll be right in." As Connor raced toward the house, Eleanor paused to admire the property she now truly considered home. The Victorian had been completely restored, its gardens meticulously designed to balance formal structure with natural wildness, much like the company she continued to build. Inside, as Maria helped Connor with his bath, Eleanor prepared for the evening. The dress, a sophisticated midnight blue column with subtle architectural details, had been designed by a former Thornfield Initiative participant who had pivoted from finance to fashion entrepreneurship with seed funding from the program. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Car's picking me up in 20. You ready to dazzle the financial elite?" Eleanor smiled. Her sister had become Thornfield's chief technology officer 3 years ago, revolutionizing their digital security and analytical capabilities. The siblings now formed the core of a leadership team widely regarded as the most innovative in Boston finance. As she fastened her mother's sapphire earrings, Eleanor studied her reflection. At 43, she carried herself with a quiet authority that commanded respect without demanding it. The traumatic events that had reshaped her life had also honed her into someone stronger, wiser and more compassionate than she'd ever imagined becoming. The ballroom of the Four Seasons Boston glittered with the city's financial aristocracy. 5 years ago, many had whispered that Thornfield Investments couldn't survive the scandal of Garrett's departure. Tonight, they celebrated the firm's transformation into an industry leader, with assets under management now exceeding $12 billion, more than triple their previous peak. Eleanor moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and discussing the initiative's impact. Connor charmed everyone he met, already displaying the social intelligence that would serve him well in whatever future he chose. "There's my godson," Diana Levinson swept Connor into a hug before turning to Eleanor. "The event is magnificent. We've already received donation commitments exceeding $2 million for next year's expansion." "The Seattle branch?" Eleanor asked. Diana nodded. "Fully funded. We'll start accepting applications next month." With the initiative now expanding nationally, Thornfield's reputation had grown beyond traditional investment management. The firm had become synonymous with ethical leadership and innovation, qualities that attracted both clients and talent. As Eleanor prepared to take the stage for her keynote address, she scanned the room reflexively, a habit formed during those uncertain days after Garrett's removal. Her eyes stopped suddenly on a figure near the back entrance, a face she hadn't seen in 5 years. Garrett Thornfield stood partially obscured by a column, older and diminished somehow, watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. Eleanor felt a momentary shock, then surprising calm. The sight of him no longer triggered pain or anger, just a distant recognition of someone who had once been central to her life. Martin Chen appeared at her side, following her gaze. "Security is aware of his presence. We can have him removed." "No," Eleanor decided. "Let him see what we've built." Martin nodded, though he remained nearby as Eleanor took the podium to enthusiastic applause. 5 years ago, she began, Thornfield Investments faced a choice, to be defined by a betrayal of trust or to transform that painful moment into something meaningful. Tonight, we celebrate choosing the latter path. As she outlined the initiative's achievements and future vision, Eleanor occasionally glanced toward Garrett. He remained motionless, listening intently as she described how the program had changed lives, created opportunities, and established new standards for the industry. The lesson we embraced was simple but profound, she continued. Real strength isn't found in power over others, but in empowering others. Real success isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by what we contribute. The audience responded with appreciative nods and applause. Among them sat graduates of the initiative who now held significant positions throughout the financial world, a living testament to Eleanor's vision. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that the Thornfield Initiative is establishing a $10 million endowment to ensure this work continues in perpetuity, she revealed. This fund, generated entirely from Thornfield's profits, represents our permanent commitment to building a financial industry that reflects the full spectrum of talent available. As Eleanor concluded her speech to a standing ovation, she noticed Garrett slipping quietly toward the exit. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room, not in challenge or recrimination, but in a moment of silent acknowledgement. Then he was gone, a ghost from a past life that no longer defined her. Later that evening, after tucking an exhausted Connor into bed, Eleanor sat in her home office reviewing the night's success. The initiative had secured funding for the next decade of operations. Thornfield's reputation had never been stronger. Her personal legacy was secure. A soft knock at the door revealed Zoe, still dressed in her gala attire, but with heels replaced by fuzzy slippers. "So we're not going to talk about the elephant that was in the room?" Zoe asked, dropping into a chair. "Or should I say, the ex-husband lurking by the exit?" Eleanor smiled. Nothing to discuss. Garrett came, he saw. He left. "You're not curious why he showed up after all this time?" "Not particularly," Eleanor replied honestly. "His reasons don't matter anymore." Zoe studied her sister with admiration. 5 years ago, seeing him would have sent you into an emotional tailspin. 5 years ago, I was still defining myself in relation to his betrayal, Eleanor acknowledged. Now, I'm defined by what I've built since then. As if to punctuate her point, she gestured to the wall of her office where framed photographs chronicled Thornfield's evolution. The first initiative class graduation, Connor at age 3 cutting the ribbon on their expanded offices, the executive team celebrating their inclusion on Forbes's most innovative financial firms list. When we were in the thick of it, Eleanor continued, fighting to save the company, I thought the goal was survival. But it was never about just surviving his betrayal. It was about discovering what could be built. Once I was free of limitations I didn't even realize existed. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. Garrett did you a favor, in a twisted way. He did, Eleanor agreed, though I wouldn't recommend his method to anyone. The sisters laughed, then fell into comfortable silence. Have you decided about the Cambridge office expansion? Zoe asked eventually. We're moving forward. The architects present their final designs next week. The expansion represented Thornfield's continued growth, not the aggressive, precarious scaling that Garrett had pursued, but sustainable development built on solid foundations and genuine client value. The following morning, Eleanor took Connor for their traditional Saturday walk along the Charles River. As they watched rowing crews glide across the water, her son's questions revealed a mind constantly working to understand the world. "Mommy, why did you keep our last name the same as the company?" he asked unexpectedly. Eleanor considered how to answer in terms a 5-year-old could grasp. Because names are just labels, Connor. What matters is what we make them stand for. Like how my name stands for me, even though lots of other people are named Connor too. Exactly, she smiled. Thornfield used to be just your father's name. Now it stands for something much bigger. All the people who work at our company, all the women in our special program, and most importantly, you and me. Connor nodded seriously, processing this information with his characteristic thoroughness. When I grow up, will I work at Thornfield too? Eleanor crouched to his level, meeting his inquisitive gaze directly. That's entirely your choice, sweetheart. The company will be there if you want it, but your life belongs to you. But you'd be happy if I did, he pressed. I'll be happy if you find something that makes you proud of yourself, she answered truthfully. Just like I'm proud of what I've built. He considered this, then nodded with satisfaction. "I think I would build it even better." Eleanor laughed, her heart full. "I have no doubt you would." As they continued their walk, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her here. What Garrett had intended as her destruction had instead been her liberation. His attempt to build an empire based on deception had collapsed like a sandcastle at high tide. In its place, she had constructed something far more enduring, a fortress built on integrity, vision, and genuine value. The morning sunlight sparkled on the river's surface, breaking into countless points of brilliance. Eleanor watched Connor race ahead on the path, fearless and joyful, unencumbered by the shadows of the past. This was her true victory, not the professional accolades or financial success, but this moment of pure possibility. Her son would grow up seeing a mother who had transformed betrayal into triumph, weakness into strength, ending into beginning. "Come on, Mommy," Connor called, waving impatiently from up ahead. Eleanor smiled and quickened her pace, moving confidently toward the future they would continue building together. One day, one decision, one principle at a time. If this story touched your heart, and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.